Hello, fellow resistors. Welcome to Political Reprobate, the show about how we survive and fight back in the age of white nationalist Christo-fascism. I'm Gemma, former Republican political operative, current political reprobate, and this is a daily podcast about how power really works in America and how we the people can take it back. This podcast exists for one reason: to help you understand what is actually happening in the country so you can resist it intelligently. Subscribe, like, and join the fight. All right, reprobates, let's get back to it. When we see certain fascist patterns popping up in modern politics, my brain automatically goes, ah, yes. We've certainly seen this movie before. Absolutely horrifyingly shitty. And now they're making a fucking sequel of one of those shittiest movies ever? Motherfuckers. We're not there yet. America is not currently a fascist state. It's kind of a fascism light. I refer to the assholes currently wielding the power of our national government as fascist because that is what they want more than anything. That is who they are. But they've not yet succeeded in completing their goal of the fascist takeover of the United States. However, we're getting closer day by day. How do I know? Because we've seen the movie and we've also read the book, or books, as in history books, about countries that later regretted their life choices in the biggest fucking way possible. Yeah, today we're going to talk about the fascism playbook and how Tangerine Palpatine and the shitwits surrounding him are taking the worst parts of their regime directly from its pages. Specifically, we'll discuss what fascism historically looks like, how it developed in Germany and Italy in the 1920s and 30s, how some of those patterns are now playing out in Hungary under Viktor Orbán, and how pages from that same shitty playbook show up here in the good old US of A in the now times. Now, before someone on the comments screams that I'm saying America is a retread of Nazi Germany, take a fucking chill pill. History never repeats exactly, but it sure does rhyme like a motherfucker. When you see the same political tactics showing up over and over again across different countries and decades, you pay attention. Very close attention. And as always, there will be swearing. Because if you're talking about the slow-mo move to fascism in America without swearing, you're just not doing it right. Now let's start with the basics of fascism, aka the script for the original shitty movie. Fascism first shows up in the early 20th century, in Italy, in Germany, and a few other places like Spain, flirting with the idea. Fascism is basically authoritarian nationalism with a strongman leader and a permanent grievance complex. That's the short version. The longer version includes several ingredients that appear repeatedly. Think of it like a terrible recipe. Convince people the country is collapsing. Blame minorities and political opponents. Declare the existing system corrupt. Promise a strong leader will restore greatness. Undermine institutions that might stop you. Then bake for a few years and serve with political violence. Congratulations, you've made fascism. And if that all sounds horribly familiar, it's because the fuckwits in the current regime are too fucking stupid to have any original ideas. Besides, this fuckwittery works, so why mess with a winning formula, am I right? Every authoritarian movement starts with the strongman pitch. Fascism is no different. Germany had Hitler, Italy had Mussolini, Hungary has Orbán. And the American Now Times has a certain extremely loud and demented reality TV character who insists that only he can fix everything. Now, the strongman pitch is always the same. It goes like this. The country is collapsing. The elites betrayed you. The system is corrupt. But don't worry, I alone can fix it, like no one ever imagined. That line is basically the authoritarian version of tech startup founders saying, we're going to disrupt an industry, which, as a technology consultant, I can confirm is exactly the kind of phrase that makes venture capitalists throw money at you. Authoritarian movements are always based on the story of decline. Germany had the humiliation of the Treaty of Versailles, which ended World War I and left Germany destitute. Italy had the myth that it had been denied greatness after World War I. Hungary's government talks constantly about defending the nation from liberal globalists and immigrants. And in modern American politics, you've heard a lot about restoring lost greatness, make America great again, the core fucking message. So core that we just use the term MAGA to describe the whole basket of shitwittery. Now, here's the trick these stories aren't about history, they're about emotion. If people believe the country has been humiliated or betrayed, they become much more willing to accept drastic political change, even if that change involves handing enormous power to one guy who yells a lot and lies like no one ever imagined about how bad things were before him. A clue, motherfucker, they weren't. But facts don't matter when you can make people feel that things suck, even when they don't. The next step in the playbook is also chillingly familiar. Pick an enemy, preferably several, and make the criteria for deciding who is an enemy vague. Germany blamed Jews, communists, and liberals, and eventually anyone who was non Aryan, which had a deliberately flexible definition that allowed the term to include anyone that Hitler didn't like. Italy blamed socialists and intellectuals. Hungary's government targets primarily immigrants. And modern American political rhetoric? Take your pick. Immigrants. Or to hear the shitwits say it, bad hombres eating the cats and dogs and murdering young white women. Journalists. Fake news and enemies of the people. Urban elites. Radical left-wing lunatics. Universities. Jesus, how this piece of orange shit hates smart people. Political opponents. James Comey, Letitia James, Adam Schiff, Liz Cheney, Adam Kinzinger. The goal obviously isn't accuracy. The fucking goal is mobilized anger, because angry voters are easier to organize and manipulate. And nothing organizes people like convincing them someone else is ruining their country and their livelihoods. Fascists also get their panties in a big fucking wad over independent media. Germany called journalists traitors, then shut them down. Italy censored the press. Hungary's media ecosystem shifted dramatically under pro-government ownership. And in the United States, we suddenly got a political vocabulary full of phrases like fake news. Now, politicians complaining about journalists is not new. I work in campaigns. Campaign staff complaining about reporters is basically a competitive sport. But authoritarian movements take it much further. They convince their dumbass cultist supporters that no source of information outside the regime and its state-approved media outlets can be trusted. Fox News, anyone? Once that happens, facts stop mattering. And once facts stop mattering, propaganda becomes extremely effective. Guess what? We've been in an increasingly post-fact media environment for about 10 years now. What happened 10 years ago? The next item in the fascist playbook is absolutely huge. Democracy only works if people accept election results. You win, you lose, you try again next time. Fascist movements fucking hate that concept because sometimes voters choose the wrong outcome for them. So the playbook says if you win, the system works. If you lose, the system must be rigged. Germany's Nazis constantly attack democratic legitimacy. Italy's fascists dismantled elections entirely. Hungary still holds elections, but the system is tilted so fucking far in the favor of the ruling party that the system is upside down. In the United States, elections still happen, or they did in 2024, and in several cases, a special election since then. But it is looking less and less likely that free and fair elections will happen in this year's November midterms. And that is a huge fucking deal. Fascism also normalizes cruelty. And we have seen a fucking shit ton of that. Once you've convinced people the nation is under threat, harsh policies start looking acceptable to about a third of the population. Immigrants treated as dangerous invaders. Political opponents treated as traitors. Minorities and immigrants treated as disposable. The rhetoric becomes harsher. The policies become harsher. And all along the fucking way, their cruelty gets framed as fucking patriotism. That's a dangerous stage in any political system, because once cruelty becomes normal, rights disappear entirely, and not just for targeted enemies. Another classic fascist move? Undermine and destroy institutions. So the motherfuckers go after the courts, civil servants, Doge anyone? Election officials. Hello, Georgia and Arizona. Regulators. What regulators, am I right? The fascist regime has had a lot of success in doing away with the regulators. But really, they target anyone who might slow down the strongman. Germany dismantled parliamentary democracy. Italy eliminated opposition parties. Hungary centralized power and laid waste to judicial independence. In the US, some institutions kinda sorta still function. Courts block government actions, but then the Supreme Court most often reverses it. States run elections. That's why the assholes are targeting elections with misinformation and fuck you rhetoric. They don't directly control them. Journalists investigate corruption, except for those who are corrupt themselves or playing the role of propagandists, which is obviously Fox, but also increasingly the alphabet soup of news outlets: CNN, CBS, NBC, ABC. These fascist regime motherfuckers who act so fucking tough show their weakness when it comes to how they respond to institutional obstacles. Here's a key thing people misunderstand: democracies don't usually collapse overnight. It's extremely rare, especially in well functioning systems. Hitler is an exception that he took over quickly, but that's because the Weimar Republic was already fucked up and the German economy was still in the shitter from World War I. For the most part, democracies erode slowly. A norm weakens here, an institution gets attacked there, people get tired, cynical, disengaged. And fascist movements take advantage of that fatigue. Because as citizens stop believing democracy works, they become more willing to try something else, even if that something else turns out to be a gigantic historical mistake. Okay, deep breath, because this episode has been kind of dark. But here's the good news: the United States still has some decently functioning democratic structures. Independent courts. Except for the Supremes, the courts have done a pretty good job of slowing down or stopping the dumb fuckery. But the Supreme Court's corruption is a big fucking deal. Also, we have federalism. The states have a lot of power, and while many are drinking the orange fucking Kool-Aid, many are not. Shout out especially to Illinois, Minnesota, and California. We have civil society. That's us, you and I, and our fellow resistors, the political reprobates. We the people. You get the point. We have competitive elections. As I've said, this is a weak point and one that the fuckwits are seriously attacking. If elections go, it all goes. Game fucking over. Notice I didn't mention the other supposedly co-equal branch of government. Yeah, Congress has taken a gigantic shit. But those systems that are still more or less working make the fascist takeover harder than it was in early 20th century Europe, which is why we have to fight to strengthen them and retake the ones that have already fallen. If it weren't for these institutions and the abject fucking incompetence of the shitbrains in the regime, we'd be having an entirely different conversation right now. As I said before, history doesn't repeat itself exactly, but it does leave behind big fucking warning signs. And when you start seeing those signs appear in modern politics, strongman rhetoric, attacks on institutions, delegitimizing elections, demonizing opponents, it's worth paying attention. Because the fascism playbook is not complicated. It's just dangerous as fuck. And the best defense against it is still the same thing it's always been: democracy. Sometimes a shit show in its own right, and far from perfect, but a fuck ton better than the alternative. Stay loud, stay skeptical, and remember, we've seen this movie before, and it ends very, very badly. I'm Gemma, former Republican political operative, current political reprobate. Join me. We're just getting started.